Good afternoon, beautiful people. Today we are diving into a pretty big development in the justice and politics arena. We're talking about the decision by a federal judge to dismiss the indictments of both former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James because the prosecutor who brought their cases was supposedly illegally appointed. This is a huge red flag moment for our justice system, a cautionary tale about politics and power. Welcome to Nelly Miranda.
Big. We have learned that the Justice Department's case against former FBI Director Jim Comey and the New York Attorney General have both been dismissed.
As always, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Okay, so let's rewind a little bit. On September 25th, Comey was indicted in Virginia on charges of making a false statement to Congress and obstructing a congressional proceeding. Around the same time, Letitia James was indicted on bank fraud and false statement charges tied to a mortgage transaction. The indictments were brought by Lindsay Halligan, a Trump-appointed interim U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia. Halligan had no prior experience as a prosecutor, and her appointment was pushed through after the previous U.S. attorney resigned under pressure when he declined to bring charges. Fast forward to today, and a federal judge, Cameron McGowan Curry, rules that Halligan's appointment was unlawful, that she lacked the legal authority to present the indictments, and that the cases against Comey and Letitia James must be dismissed. In short, the process failed. They say, yes, the investigation was done. Yes, the charges were filed. But because the prosecutor didn't have a proper appointment, the entire case gets tossed. This is insanity.
Caitlin, okay, what happened here? I don't know which case you want to take first.
Well, they both are being dismissed, and for essentially the same reason that Lindsay Halligan, the Eastern District of Virginia interim U.S. attorney sent there by Donald Trump, not Senate confirmed, that she doesn't have the power. What the judge here has found, this is Judge Cameron Curry from South Carolina. She came into the district, heard arguments from both of the lawyers on these cases against Lindsay Halligan's role. They argued that she didn't have the power because she wasn't Senate confirmed, and thus these indictments are invalid. The judge is agreeing with that. Judge Curry is saying that the Attorney General's attempt to install Ms. Halligan as interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia was invalid, and because Ms. Halligan had no lawful authority to present the indictment, James Comey's motion is granted, the indictment is dismissed. Now, the judge does mention that this is without prejudice. So in legal speak, that means that it could be brought back by another prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia if they took it through the grand jury again. But everything Lindsay Halligan did at the end of September, beginning of October, and since then, this judge is saying she couldn't have done that. She didn't have the authority. She was not confirmed by Congress, by the U.S. Senate as the Eastern District of Virginia's U.S. attorney, and thus the president went out of his bounds, and the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, also overstepped her bounds in sending Lindsay Halligan into this district to get these indictments against both Comey and James.
Now, let me be clear. This isn't only about whether James Comey or Letitia James are guilty or not. It's about whether the rules apply equally to everyone, whether the justice system is anchored in law and not politics. The rule of law only works when the rules are actually followed. Once the system looks political, whether that be rushed appointments, questionable authority, and cases collapsing, not for the crimes actually committed, but minor infractions, people stop seeing law enforcement and start seeing a political class who, unfortunately, the rules just do not apply to them.
The judge finding the prosecutor in those cases, Lindsay Halligan, was illegally appointed, meaning any actions she's taken as acting U.S. attorney were unlawful. Courts and legal reporter with The Hill, Zach Schoenfeld, is with me now to help me break all of this down. Zach, all of this really hot off the presses. Let's start at the beginning with this breaking news on the judge throwing out the charges against former FBI Director James Comey and Letitia James, saying that Halligan is accused of lying to Congress, saying that, Comey lied to Congress when he testified that he never authorized FBI officials to leak information to the press. What are you learning, and what has the White House said in response to this?
Hey, good afternoon, Nick. This ruling just coming down from this judge here in just the last few minutes, dismissing both these high-profile prosecutions against both James Comey and Letitia James. Both of these rulings, they're very similar. It's for the same reason, saying that a U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia who has brought both of these indictments, Lindsay Halligan, was unlawfully appointed. So this ruling at its core really has nothing to do with the actual merits of these criminal allegations against Comey and James, whether it be the lying to Congress allegations against James Comey or the mortgage fraud accusations against Letitia James. They deny that, of course, but instead this ruling is really saying that this U.S. attorney was never lawfully appointed in the first place, and so all of these actions, specifically when she went before those grand juries to seek those indictments, that all of that is invalid and that these charges all have to be dismissed.
So all in all, this ruling has absolutely nothing to do with the case, but rather the appointment of Lindsay Halligan. I hope both these cases are tried again, but if not, it only signals that they can commit crimes so as long as they can find a loophole to set them free.
Zach, I'm glad that you said that this has nothing to do with whether or not the merits of the case were valid or invalid. The judge is saying, before we even go any further than that, if I'm understanding you correctly, the person who brought these charges never should have been in that role.
That's right. And in fact, another thing that has been making a lot of news in recent days, specifically about James Comey's case, was a lot about what happened in those grand jury proceedings. There have been questions about, the transcripts of those proceedings, whether the grand jury actually saw the final indictment that was eventually handed up to the judge. The government at one point had conceded that it was not shown. Then they submitted a filing reversing, saying that it was. But this ruling is instead totally on a different thread. In fact, it's actually even by a different judge, because this issue had to dealt with Lindsay Halligan's appointment. It gets into a bit of a unique circumstance where they actually have to pull in a judge from a different court to adjudicate this. So this is Judge Cameron Curie, a judge who normally would serve in South Carolina and is an appointee of former President Bill Clinton.
And Zach, not to get too into the weeds, but this may have even saved Ms. Halligan any kind of retribution on her end legally, because if indeed that indictment had been changed like the judge had suggested, that could have had her censured or brought up on legal charges of her own. Do you believe these charges will be appealed, though?
I think, the Justice Department, although we haven't heard from them quite yet, you'd imagine that they are likely going to appeal this. Obviously, we've seen them in all sorts of cases. Usually we're talking about civil lawsuits and challenges to Trump administration policies. Here we are talking about criminal prosecution, so a bit of a different bucket. But still, we see the Trump administration, never being afraid to appeal things. But certainly that is the top question right now as to whether they will appeal this ruling and start trying to get these prosecutions potentially revived.
And Zach, by all accounts, both Comey and James, formidable opponents to the president, who are very versed in legalese and had strong defense teams of their own. Comey, in his defense, had planned to talk about vindictive prosecution. We didn't even get to hear it that far, right? What reaction are you hearing, and how does this look?
Yeah, that's right. All these other issues that we've been talking about ever since these charges were brought, we didn't even get to those. Now, those motions we expected to be decided soon, but this is really, the first one out of the gate. Now, I will also say the timing here, it was expected. The judge had indicated that they would be ruling in advance of Thanksgiving. So
I think going forward, we're likely to see a lot more scrutiny on how U.S. attorneys are appointed, especially these interim picks that can bypass Senate confirmation. That whole process is now under a microscope. Prosecutors will probably be far more cautious about bringing charges against high-profile political figures unless the foundation is absolutely solid, because any hint of political influence give the defense an easy opening, and courts are clearly willing to act on it. Congress may also get involved, pushing for clearer rules and more transparency around appointments. But what do you think? Does this ruling restore your confidence in the courts or make you doubt the entire process even more? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And as always, if honest commentary brings you value, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to support the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.